Hi guys, hope everybody is doing great and welcome to Talk with Nick. So guys, if you have studied biology and you wonder how to use your skill sets in the field of robotics, or if you have studied robotics or mechanical engineering and wondering how to use your skill sets in biology, then this video is for you because in this video I have a special guest whose name is Ishan and have completed his PhD in Switzerland and have also started his startup in Switzerland, which is quite interesting and has a fantastic journey. If you want to know more about the process of PhD, the process of using different subjects like mechanical engineering, biology to create a fantastic project, and the process of starting a startup in Switzerland, then keep watching this video. Hi guys, welcome to Talk with Nick again. Today I have a friend named Ishan who has done his PhD, completed his PhD from ETH Zurich, and his background is quite diverse and have a lot of dots. He has studied in the area of aerospace, biology, mechanical engineering, and I think in the end he's going to reach into the subject called astrobiology. So Ishan, welcome to Talk with Nick, and thank you so much for giving me your time.
Yeah,
Uh, I have given your introduction, but I'm really curious. What is the subject astrobiology? If you have to explain this to somebody who is 18 or 19-year old and would like to
yeah,
pursue this subject.
right. So, astrobiology, it is my future goal to eventually step into this field. But astrobiology has, different kinds of branches and aspects that can be included. Firstly, it could be, of course, the health and let's say the sustenance of the astronauts themselves who are traveling through space for a long, long duration. It can be both the mental aspects, it can be social aspects, it can also be also the let's say the body, the health of the body. So in my masters I worked in a NASA project in US where I was working on stimulating the bones of astronauts who are, let's say, subjected to microgravity or even like very zero gravity conditions, because their bones and muscles are not used to the gravity of Earth. So we are somehow working on a solution to kind of restore the bone strength so that when they come back they do not face problems like arthritis or osteoporosis. So this is one aspect. There can be other aspects like plant biology if you want to study or grow plants in space, and how to make these efficient systems of you know a food source and other ideas. So it has diverse aspects. So this is what I am kind of interested in. Yeah.
Well, that's really fantastic. So, we are already seeing that the space science is growing like crazy. The private companies are investing in space science and technology. So I think astrobiology will be one of the subjects which is going to have a big boom in the next few
Indeed.
years.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
great. And so I'm just curious to know about the PhD process in Switzerland. Switzerland is one of the fantastic countries and it has a good PhD salary and
Mm-hmm.
all these factors. I don't know how is the academic culture of Switzerland. So can
Mm-hmm.
you throw us some light, like what is the basic PhD process? How do you get selected for a PhD in Switzerland?
Yeah.
What is the lifestyle of a PhD student in Switzerland?
So in Switzerland, the application process itself is quite straightforward. In a sense, they do not require a GRE exam, or they do not require a, let's say, a qualifying exam like TOEFL or IELTS before applying to the program. So in a case with me, it happened that all the available PhD positions are advertised on the specific universities vacancy list as open positions. So one can actually look into the website to look for every position, and if something matches, they can directly write a application letter and their CV first to the professor or whoever is going through these application documents. And then if is followed by interview. I had actually two interviews with my, let's say, immediate supervisor and a bigger consortium of professors. So it's a very straightforward process. It's and does not it's not complicated. But after let's say if I'm chosen, let's say selected as a a candidate who has been accepted, then I'll have to produce like reference letters after that from my previous researchers, and also a English qualification exam if I'm not from a English speaking country. But I had my master's in US, so I was also able to evade that requirement. So essentially I had it was a pretty straightforward process. Just write the apply on the website for the specific position and have discussions, and yeah, that's how it takes about a week or 10 days at max.
And I believe that the selection process will be a little bit competitive. Like you must have a competitive profile. So what kind of profile did you had, and what kind of documentation did you send to the selection committee? And what was the main key points that you mentioned in your application to make sure
Well,
that you will get selected for this position?
yeah, I think the point where it comes to, let's say everyone thinks, yeah, ETH, it might be competitive to get into, and I might need a super strong profile to be competitive. However, it is not the exact case, because you can approach such like things in life with two approaches. Let's say first you are very good, the best in the field, and you are, the most competitive. This is one idea. Other is if you're diverse enough, if you are having a large skill set that can be used by the research project, then you already have an advantage. Because now, right now the projects are so interdisciplinary. Because in my case, the project had collaborations with biology department, they had collaborations with computational physics, as well as mechanical engineering. So it is so diverse that asking for like the best or the most qualified person does not really make sense. They would rather prefer somebody who knows a bit of everything, and not the best, but it is actually kind of nice way to de-risk your own career if you're well spread. So this position was quite weird in a sense. They looked for a mechanical engineer who had computational skills, as well as biological tissue cutting skills and all this stuff. And so this skill set was so diverse, no one really actually applied for several months, and this position was somewhere way bottom at the let's say the list of vacant positions. So in a sense, if I applied somehow relating my previous background, that I have this, I have bit of that, maybe I'm good fit. And so in my strategy, it worked out. I diversified my skills, so I de-risked my chances, and then I was able to get through. So if in this case, just be diverse enough.
Yeah, that's really cool. Even I found your all the skill sets to be very, very, very diverse. I've never seen a profile like that. That you are using mechanical engineering, you are using biology, and you are studying so many complex subjects.
Yeah.
Now, it's thanks for giving me such a different answer, because I've never heard answer like this. Like you need to have a diverse skill sets and all these things. So I will come to your subject. You
Hmm.
are working with the carnivorous plants,
Yeah.
and you are using some sort of robots to study those plants. So
Yeah.
what is a carnivorous plant?
So carnivorous plants are, like, for example, different types. They are essentially plants that grow on certain environments that are devoid of very essential nutrients. For example, I was working on the Venus flytrap. So it is a plant that has like two leaves and claws like this. And when an insect crawls on the surface of the leaf, it like snaps and it just, captures the insect. So the idea is, these plants, they grow on such marshy and swampy lands that they're devoid of certain nutrients. So evolutionary wise, they adapted their leaves to be able to be prey capture. Other examples are like the pitcher plant. So they are mostly like this cup here, and they have a lid, and when an insect falls down, it just closes the lid. So this is one example. And they work on the basis of thigmonastic plants. Basically they are touch sensitive, and so when these insects crawl on the surface, they have very small tiny hairs which respond to touch. So and when these hairs get triggered, these leaves are closed. So that's how they trap prey.
All
Yeah.
right, that's great. And now my question is, like you said, that they eat insects, they eat
Yeah.
what are the different kind of insects they eat? I read that they eat snails, and they eat snails, and the other one was butterflies. I read that in your press release. So what all other kinds of insects they eat?
It totally depends on the plant and the environment it grows in, because different environments has different insects. And usually the Venus flytrap eats stuff like, fly size, like house fly. So
Okay.
that sized insects, so which fly and just fall down. And but there are also larger plants that can, of course, go to larger preys, but it actually depends on what prey is available. So in my case, the Venus flytrap eats insects like flies that are, of the size of a house fly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And were you able to grow the this Venus trap plant in your lab, or you had to go in the field?
Actually, we had to. So the Venus flytrap traditionally or historically, it's native to North and South Carolina. So that's where
Okay.
it has swampy lands. But over time, people brought it across the world, and we have the Venus flytrap in our lab. Basically, it's in a very controlled setting where the humidity and the moisture is made really high, so that it emulates the situation of a marshy and swampy land. And it needs special conditions, because if we do not attend to the plant, they are very sensitive and they die. And hence we had our lab, we had a professional gardener who takes care of these plants, waters it, we use it for experiments and put it back in the lab. So that's how it worked.
And
Yeah.
and so these plants have a seed which they use to grow bigger, or how do they grow? Like, do we need a seed to grow this plant?
uh do you need a seed? Yeah, I mean, at the you can actually have a seed, yes. You can grow it from the seed, but it takes a long time. So what we usually do is, like, we have one generation of plants from the seeds, then we just, you can split them up into two halves, and then again they grow further. So it's more of
Okay.
a, from a, let's say, a biology point of view, this question of how they reproduce. But I think as engineers, we were just essentially, when they grow up into a bunch, we split them up, separate into pots, and they are growing into different plants from there. So
Okay.
it's
Got it.
yeah,
Got it.
because growing from the seed is a very exhaustive process, and we do not have sufficient time to grow again. And so we just went ahead with having one population, then spreading them apart into different pots.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
understandable for sure. To finish the PhD in time, we need to do these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
All right. So uh, it was saying that it takes two touches to
Mhm.
snap. What will happen if there is just one touch or three touch?
So this was a very interesting finding from my first paper that was published from my experiments. So traditionally, everyone thought that the plant needs two touches of these hairs within 30 to 40 seconds. If it's
Okay.
beyond that, the plant will consider it as a new touch. So it has to be within this time frame, two touches, in order to close. Now, the question is, so what we asked ourselves is that, if there is a, different regime where even a single touch works, or even, we need three touches. So what we did was we experimented with different velocities to, trigger these hairs, and different angle of deflection of these hairs. So we had precise multi-scale robotics to, deflect these hairs. And what we found out, that the plant in fact has really slow speed zones where, if you just cling to the hair and pull it very slowly, then one touch is also sufficient. And whatever we found, that we kind of concluded that yes, one touch works, two touch also works, it's seen, and three touch will also work. However, it's like, biological filtering mechanism. So the plant wants to recognize that it's a prey, that prey that's worthy of closing. And it's like a filtering mechanism that a plant has, adapted through evolution, that, it has to be touched twice, so that, just to make sure it's an insect, it's not like a random gust of air or a raindrop. So it's kind of, yes, a filtering mechanism that a plant uses to recognize suitable prey.
Wow, that's quite interesting. And
Mhm.
do we and have we already decoded the all the mechanism how it works, or we are still in the process to decode the entire mechanism?
So we are still in the process, and in a sense, what has been decoded is at the very macro level, like the hair structure, and also we know at the cellular structure, there are some special sensory cells within these hairs that respond to touch. But at a subcellular level, at a very nanoscale, there are these, ion channels, which are specially, these ion channels allow, certain ions to conduct between the cell membrane and the, the exterior environment. So these ion channels are touch receptors basically. So when you touch, these ion channels activate and they let the flow of these ions. And this topic is actually not well decoded. In fact, the Nobel Prize for this year's medicine, who is in physiology, was given to the touch receptor people in California. So
Okay.
Dr. Ardem Patapotian, in fact, he has also worked on Venus flytraps at that scale of the, understanding how ion channels work. So I think this is quite a hot topic, and we got the, I mean, not we, but he got the Nobel for this field. And I think there's a lot to be discovered. Yes, how touch works in nature.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for bringing this in the notice. I think all the students could get an idea if they want to get a PhD position, they need to work on the touch receptors.
Yeah.
All right. So now my next question is like you must be working with the cameras to capture all those things, like
Yeah.
So and these observations are quite rapid, and we need some high sensitive cameras. So what kind of cameras you were using? Like how what kind of cameras are being used in this kind
Yeah.
of stuff?
So in my first year, like I told you, I had a lot of experiments, but in the next year I had modeling and simulations. So for modeling and simulations, I had to, like, mimic the hair in my computer. For that, I had to get the geometry of the hair from these images. We had to gather high resolution images of this hair. These hairs are few millimeters. And especially we are interested in a sensory cell, which is like about 100 micrometer in size. So to get this such high resolution pictures, normal camera or even like CT scanner does not work. So what we did is we went to a particle accelerator. We have quite a few in Switzerland, these particle accelerators. And so what these particle accelerators do is, there's a circular, big, huge kilometer wide accelerator. And every accelerator has exits, tangential exits of special photons. These photons
Okay.
are in the X-ray photons, basically. And we use these photons to bombard our specimen, like our trigger hair, the sensory hair. And when these photons bombard this hair, there's a scattering pattern. There is, these photons are absorbed, some are scattered, and some are diffracted. So we analyze these emissions of these photons to get the gathered geometric information. So this way we're able to get, very high resolution image, like 3D volumes of stacks of like image stacks of the hair,
Okay.
which we then import into the computer to process the images using different image processing algorithms, and then, get the geometry for making a computational mechanical model. So this was a big step-by-step process. Yes.
Wow, that's quite interesting. I'm really
Yeah.
enjoying this research project. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now, I had a question like, what kind of skill sets do you need to do this kind of research? Like, if
Mhm.
somebody wants to apply, you have already mentioned like you need a bits of this, bits of that.
Yeah.
But if somebody wants to enter into the touch receptors or the field that you're working with, so
Yeah.
what are the popular skill sets that one student can have and can get a position in this kind of
Skill
field?
sets, yeah, right. So
Yep.
it depends on what scale are you studying your plant from. Are you studying from organ scale? Are you studying it from a tissue scale or cellular or a subcellular scale? So as a mechanical engineer, what I needed was modeling skills of a mechanical software. So I needed for that, CAD skills, computer aided design. So you can have softwares like SolidWorks or Siemens NX. So these software help you to build the geometry. Then you need to simulate the mechanical stresses and deflection and forces. For that, I used finite element code. So finite element method is a FEM based. So it's FEM is a quite standard solution, or let's say a approach to have mechanical simulations. So example of softwares are ANSYS and Abacus. So these are
Okay.
quite standard software. And now this is at the macro level, the like a hair level. But if you want to go to subcellular scale, then you need to have more, modeling in discrete mechanics. So that includes like, molecular atomistic modeling, where you need to model in a bunch of molecules in a fiber. So these are quite small scale. So for that you need MD. So MD is molecular dynamics. And in molecular dynamics, example of softwares are like Gromax and Lamps. So these are different software that one can use. Of course, one needs some coding skills to, kind of basic stuff to run scripts in Python or C++. So this is from the computational aspect. And next is from the imaging aspect. Also, we need image processing skills. So I used MATLAB for my image processing. So I
Okay.
imported the 3D data stack and then, analyzed it, applied. So MATLAB has good image processing toolbox. So they'll allow you to have standard libraries that you can implement to, cut out specific segments that you're interested in. And lastly, for like experimental skills, I think microscopy is needed, just it can be any microscope. I think we used some, yeah, it was the standard microscope, essentially bright field
Yeah.
microscope. And what else? Some tissue dissection skills of how to, cut tissues using microtome, very like 1 micrometer thin slices, then embedded in like, some uh, PEG solution. So it basically hardens it, and then you can observe it under microscope. These are actually standard biology
Understood.
skills that are taught in bachelor's. Yeah.
That's great. Now I have just two, three more questions. I hope you have time, right? Is it
Yeah, I
okay?
have time. Yes, no problem.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
does your research have any industrial applications?
Mm-hmm. Okay,
So,
so this is a good question. So when this position was advertised, so in a sense, what my research does not immediately lead to a product for the market, but it leads the foundational like concepts and ideas for building bio-inspired sensors. Basically, these are sensors that can detect like wind speed, movement of water, or they can also detect pressure. So these are various sensors that are implemented in various applications. It could be in like, hydroelectric dams, it can be applied in water level checks, it can be applied in tunnels to monitor flow of fluid, oil, whatever. So these are sensors that are used. And to have bio-inspired sensors, the advantage is that, firstly, bio-inspired technologies, they are of course, let's say renewable or biodegradable. And next thing is, you have diversity in such sensors, basically because these artificial sensors, they're very specific, they're fragile, and they are only used to do one task. But for example, the sensory hair of the Venus flytrap plant, it is able to detect speed, it is able to detect deflection, it is able to detect also like, keep track of time of 30 to 40 seconds. So it has a complex system that can, measure various parameters. So it somehow helps people to, measure wide range of mechanical, let's say, inputs with just one sensor that is also biodegradable, and it could be, the foundation of such new generation of sensors.
wow, that's really interesting. Now I'm curious, like, because you mentioned something about hydroelectric dams. Now I
Yeah,
wonder if we can use this kind of sensors in the mountains, like in India, in Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand. There are a lot of dams in the high altitude, and if
right,
we could
right.
use this kind of sensors in those kind of dams to
Yes,
prevent the mishappenings, because these are in the very, very sensitive places, and there are always
exactly.
so many. Yeah, that's really interesting. I will look forward
Yeah.
to all these kind of research
Yeah,
work now.
there have been some labs who are developing hair-like sensors. Basically, they have a, let's say, a big array of such hairs, not just one, but let's say 10 of them in a small, let's say, a board, and this board can be just attached to some, wall or a ceiling or a surface. And as the fluid moves, the hairs also move, and they can detect movement, the speed, and various other parameters.
All right, that's
Yeah,
great. Thank you. Thank you.
yeah.
Now, I have a question about your startup,
Oh,
because
yes.
you said that you have a startup. Like
Right.
as an international student, you have completed your PhD. Well,
Yeah.
how did you move to the startup journey, and what is the process to start your company in Switzerland?
Okay. So it's a quite a straightforward process. So for me, I think one motivation is that I always like to have 2-3 side projects in beyond my main focus, just to learn new stuff and keep myself, in exciting projects that are quite interesting to see in immediate applications, because research, as you know, is quite fundamental. It needs several years to have a product, and then furthermore to have a scalable idea. But I am like, so as a mechanical engineer, I was also like to have something that is more application based. So I was part of this startup. Actually, we started in my second year of my PhD. uh, it is a medical device startup. We started somewhere in like 2019. So in the daytime, I used to work on my PhD, and in the night, I used to work on the startup idea. So we are basically developing some medical devices to prevent infections that occur in the hospital. So what happens is that, suppose in an hospital, you have, in a serious accident, you have several. One second, I'll just have some water.
Yeah, take your time.
Mm. Yeah, so in a hospital, you have several tubes and catheters that are inserted into your body. Now, what happens is that the surface of these catheters, they get infected due to bacteria present in the atmosphere, like in the hospital room itself. And they start colonizing the surface, and they enter your body, and then they create a new infection on top of the existing problem you already had. So we're kind of finding a disinfection solution to make catheters clean, or clean catheters when they're already inside your body, without like taking it out or applying any antibiotics, any stuff. So we are working with hospitals in Switzerland itself, and we are based in Zurich. So it's been about 2 years. Yeah, we are kind of we finished the feasibility and proof of concept stage. Now we are in the seed funding round for our prototype and our clinical trials and stuff. So that's coming ahead.
So
And yeah,
what's the name of your company?
no, it's called Acceptuva. Uh,
SF2. Okay.
Acceptuva,
Uh,
yeah.
are you available on internet now?
Yes, we are. We have a website as well, Acceptuva, ASEPTUVA.ch.
Okay.
And well, we do not have products to offer yet, but we are working closely with hospitals to find solutions. And like your second question, which was how easy it is to do a startup in Switzerland, I think it's pretty quite straightforward. You have an idea, and then you find your friends or colleagues who are also in this project or interested, and then you can set up a startup at different levels, like you have LLC and LTD companies. So we are I think let's say, not the in Switzerland we have categories called GmbH and AG.
Okay.
So AG is the biggest one, like all the big Deloitte or Google, everyone is AG. We are the second, or let's say mid-level, it's called GmbH, which is kind of an LLC.
Okay.
For that, actually, the investment needed is about $20,000, which we need to give as a security deposit, but we can use that amount of money.
Okay.
And that is all that is needed to set up a company. And for that $20,000, you can either self-finance, or there are also several competitions we took part, and we got award money. And with the help of that, we basically registered as a GmbH, and then yeah, and then you can just start working on it. And in the future, then you can also get grants, like research grants. And what is good about Switzerland is that there's a lot of funds available for R&D. So and so the, let's say, the supply of funds to the let's say the application of, or let's say the competition is quite reasonable. It's not as competitive as in US, or I would say in UK, but in Switzerland, it's a very close, small community. The funds are quite splendid. So what we can do is, we apply for grants, and the money is given by the government, not to us directly, but through us to a research institution. So
Okay.
basically, it pays for the salary of all the microbiologists and the doctors, whoever we want to collaborate with. So in that sense, it's really convenient that we are having our lab associated with an institute, and we are doing our tests, we're doing our studies there, and we get the results, and we get to keep the findings and use it for our business.
Oh, that's really interesting. It's a different process of how the startup works.
Yeah.
I will check. I will look into more how the startup culture works in the Switzerland. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for giving me all this precise and very fantastic information. Now,
Yeah.
I have just the last question. That's a personal
Yeah.
question. Like, how do you see yourself in next 10 years? Do you see yourself living in Switzerland, working in Switzerland, or what's your
uh
next 10-year plan?
yeah, so for me this is quite unsure, or let's say I have not thought much about it. I mean, for me it was what do. So I have this, every 3 or 4 years I have a very strong urge to leave the place and go to a new place and start from scratch. This has been my thing there. So like in my bachelor's, I was in Assam for about 4 years. Then I went to New York for another three
Yeah.
years. Then I'm in Zurich for another three, a bit more. I'm having this urge again to start somewhere from a fresh in a new field and a new institute or environment. So I always have this. So I think I'm constantly on the move, and usually I'm like switching fields quite a lot, like as mechanical engineering in bachelor's, then I studied orthopedics in for my master's. Now it's more botany in my PhD, and for later I don't know, it's a bit yeah, it's a very, very unsure. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I'm looking forward like what you're gonna do next, and maybe in next 4 years I will take one more interview with you.
Yeah, even I'm curious what I'll be doing in next 4 years.
That's great. That's all about that. That's the fantastic thing about research. You can always explore and go on and study across the world. All
Yes,
right,
yes.
Ishan, thank you so
Yeah,
much for giving me your
thank
time.
you
It was
again.
really pleasure to talk with you. I learned a lot of
Yeah,
things with you in the last 45 minutes. It was really
yeah.
interesting.
Nice, and happy Diwali. Send my
Happy
regards to your
Diwali, man.
family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Ciao.